Hi everyone, welcome. Have you ever seen my little green board so packed with information before? It just seemed like there was a good bit of information to share about these two systems that we're going to feed today. The systems that we're going to feed today are the ones that are right here on the top shelf to my left. And they've been treated as sort of buddy bins, getting fed at the same time for a while now. So I'm going to get them up on the bench. We can take a closer look at this together once they're here. And yeah, you can even see I've set the table to feed two systems. All right, everyone, let's get these things started. 14 days have passed since these two systems were last fed, and they got celery only. And as you can see here, they're getting a little bit more, but the celery is combined with a whole bunch of other things. Mostly stuff that would have been used to make up some soup, carrot peels and whatnot. And there's a good bit of it here, quite a bit more than they got last time. I've also got coffee and couple other things, maybe worm chow if we decide to give them some. But before we proceed, let me just show you that this is the older of the two systems, the 308-day-old system. And it's funny, I was looking through my old record keeping, and I haven't updated it. My old record keeping still shows that a 215-day-old system was my oldest system ever. And since that time, I've had many other systems exceed that date, and this one's quite up there too. I was just curious if 308 is possibly the longest period of time, but it's not true. The oldest system I've had so far was really my Vermibag Mini, which is it's a continuous flow through system. The whole idea there being that you're always loading the top and emptying the bottom. Here, I was trying to mimic a similar sort of setup, sometimes called wedge, but also sometimes considered continuous flow. And I guess continuous flow through is like vertical, going down through the bottom hatch, emptying the system out on the bottom. With a continuous flow set up this way, the idea is that you feed on one end and scoop out the finished castings on the other end. So 308 days, which is 44 weeks, fed 25 times now. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff here. This is I guess what distinguishes the two bins from one another. This one being the one where we were doing sort of the ping pong feedings, going back and forth for some time, and there's also novelty items in here such as cork and the stem of a pumpkin. And here's what brings them back together, which is the fact that we've been following this wedge or continuous flow pattern for 70 days now, 6 feedings. And like I said earlier, it's been 14 days since we gave them celery over here. And we decided at that time to leave the opposite end dry now, because we had covered the entire thing and the whole thing had a good moisture content to it. As you can see, the moisture is clear because of the darker color of the material, and the drier end of it is a little bit lighter. Get off. And my idea with that was that maybe at some point we would want to consider actually doing what one of these wedge or continuous flow systems is meant to do, which is to, offer up its completed castings for harvesting. Just scoop them right out, because if it's been depleted of food, and at this point if it's been depleted of moisture too, to a certain degree, it's going to become a place that the worms are not too keen on staying in, especially if the feeding's been happening on the opposite end. Now here's just some coffee filter that we've been using as an indicator to show us where we last fed. I guess I'm curious to see if we were to start excavating this far end, have the worms left the material because it was left to dry a little bit? Obviously not. I go right to the bottom and there's worms in it, and I kind of thought that leaving it uncovered a little bit might help it become a little bit less of a place that the worms would want to remain in, and have them gravitate towards the opposite end. I don't know, at some point we might decide to just try to migrate the worms out of this material, but it's a little bit tricky. If the material remains nice and damp, as castings do because of their nature, they just hang on to their moisture quite nicely for a long time. So, I don't know, I figured I would take some of that top material that was a little bit dry and blend it in with the neighboring materials, possibly helping it all dry a little bit further. And we could try to bring back some of this stuff that was pushed aside that had been out on the top. Maybe we can actually leave more of it uncovered instead of just a little strip, maybe even leave half the bin uncovered. So I think it would be fair to assume that throughout the material we're going to find worms pretty much everywhere. And usually you would probably also want to probably assume that the greatest number of worms are going to be over on the end that was last fed. But the type of food they got last time, a couple frozen stalks of celery, I would think that that celery, once it thawed out, it probably became, you know, a delicacy for them to nibble on and chew up. So I'm doubtful that we're going to see many, if any, leftovers of that. So why don't we make our way over there to see what, if anything, was left of the celery that they got last time. There were 2 pretty good pieces placed into each system. And what we also had put down in there alongside the new feeding was leftovers from previous feedings. This is some corn cob, which is just going to take a long time, which corn cob always does take a long time. I think I might have made reference earlier to the pumpkin stem, one of the novelty items that's been getting worked down in this system here. Oops, kind of neat how it has this really cool star shape to it. Yep, if I knew I had another piece of corn cob in my hand there briefly. Oh, and I remember this too. I remember a couple banana stems. The other one was really far gone. This one was still holding up pretty good. I'm getting the sense that we're probably not going to see the other one. I'm just curious what happened to the cork. Here it is. I would say the cork is probably the slowest thing. Go back years and years when I first placed this cork into one of my systems. I think it actually started, I don't remember where it started or when it started. It goes way, way back. And the only reason it's missing that little corner there is that I accidentally chipped off a little bit of it once upon a time, unintentionally. With novelty items like that, I really, you know, prefer to see what the worms make of it on their own without me helping to break it down or break it up. So I believe what we're seeing here is actually the remaining fibrous strands of the celery. And that's just the way celery is. The fibrous strands in it are a little bit tougher material, but all the fleshy, softer veggie material in between those strands and fibrous pieces are all gone. It's interesting that we even found that much. I had this kind of funny feeling like we might not even find that much leftovers in here. Good number of worms hanging out in here. I think I must have like put down their whole life story here, but I did not put down what we estimated to be the starting count of worms in this system. I did seem to transcribe a good bit of the information I have in my tracking spreadsheet to the grain board about each of these systems, but that was just one bit that I sort of forgot to include. Although I always include those starting counts, there's no way of knowing how many worms really occupy the system at the present time. Every now and then I bump into stuff that appear to have gone through my shredder, which seem like they're just not going to go. So I just feel better removing them. So last time I think the past couple times we were super skimpy on the bedding, and I just felt like, you know, we should try to make up for that and give them a little bit of bedding this time, because I think just this is evidence of it too, right? They would have gotten a nice brand new coffee filter here, and look what they've done to it in pursuit of some sort of a more carbon-rich food item. Besides destroying the celery pieces that they got, they also came up and really did a number on that coffee filter. So I thought this time we would just be a little bit kinder and give them what they crave, which is a good complement to the kitchen scrap type foods that they're getting. Some, you know, bedding type material, which really doubles as a carbon heavy food source. And instead of just receiving a couple flimsy stalks of celery, they're going to get a whole variety of different yummy things, and a good bit of it too. Let's make sure they get some of this carrot here too. I'm pretty sure worms love carrot. It's got a good sugar content to it. I think that's the reason people make carrot cake and stuff out of it. So think we've left about half of it for the other system. Let's not forget that we've got coffee for them too. But before we do that, why don't we bring in some of these leftovers, the novelty items, the cork and the pumpkin stem, these bits of corn cob remaining, as well as this banana stem. Yeah, things are looking pretty good in here. And I've debated, you know, what to do with these systems at some point soon. It seems like we would probably want to get these worms moving out and moving into a nice new place so they could do their work elsewhere in a nice bin full of fresh bedding for them to explore and to nibble on. But for now, it seems like we're okay letting them go. I think mainly because there's a good amount of room remaining in here. It just didn't seem terribly necessary to move them out because it seems like we've got room enough in here to just keep going for a while. Okay. I think what we will do though, when we're putting the plastic covering back on, I think we'll do so in a way that we leave a good bit more of the material on this far end, opposite of the feeding, uncovered, to really let the material start to dry. I really do like the texture of the material. I'm sure the worms do too, because it's got nice flaky consistency. It all just sort of breaks apart from itself, making the worms able to explore all of it, basically. None of it's clumping together. And it's all got a really good moisture content to it, even the side that was left uncovered for the longest time. So I think this time covering up is going to be pretty much on the feeding side, but the opposite end, I think we're going to leave a good bit more of it uncovered to let it continue drying a little bit, possibly, you know, getting the worms to move over to the opposite edge. And then maybe at some point we can actually go through the motions of actually removing some worm castings from this system, the way a, you know, continuous flow type system would be managed normally, since we are, you know, trying to just test drive that process here. But we're gonna go get the second bin now and get them fed. I'll be right back with that one and we'll continue. Alrighty, this one, somehow it just feels a little bit heavier to me. I don't know. Even though, you know, as far as coming up to the rim, it doesn't look like it has much more material in it. It makes me wonder if the extra weight is possibly just more moisture within the system. It's hard to say. Here too, you get to check out how this coffee filter is holding up to the onslaught of the worms. Here too, the outer edges are nicely nibbled down. Where the fold was, it seems like they hit that pretty good too. So we'll include that as part of the bedding once we rebuild their feeding area. So this is much more of the same. Now the only difference in this one, if you might have already kind of read ahead, was that we had experimented in this system with different types of test bedding materials, and there was some twine placed in here which vanished quite some time ago, but the cotton that we put in there, there's still remnants of the cotton, which was towel, socks. Well, the towel itself has been gone for quite a while now, but the socks remain, and they're up to 247 days now, and that's over 35 weeks. And to tell you the truth, I believe that the socks, what we're seeing left of the socks at least, is not even cotton anymore. I think that's just the elastic type materials that give the sock its springiness. I had thought about maybe using one of these future check-ins as the final check-in on those socks, but I've been leaving them because it seems like the worms do enjoy using it as a bedding material to just hang out in and hang out on. I'm definitely feeling a lot more moisture at the very bottom of this system than I felt in the other system. And even though these have been buddied up and running tandem to each other for some time now, somehow it does appear that this system managed to get more moisture one way or another. And I believe that that accounts for the the additional weight I'm feeling when I lift the container. The material on this end, not quite as dry either. Obviously, very damp, as I mentioned earlier, but the interesting thing about it is that it doesn't clump up or get muddy. It all crumbles really nicely. All the more reason, I believe, to let this stuff air out, and once in a while just to till it up and combine it with some drier materials from the surface that have been left to dry. And hopefully, as a result of that, sort of spreading out the moisture content, equalizing it a little bit. I don't know. I just get a little suspicious of materials like this that just, look at that, springy. We just went through a bout of dealing with this exact same type of material that made its way into my shredder, except the system that I just removed a whole bunch of that from had already had that stuff isolated. And it's not surprising that I guess it surfaces here and there once in a while. Alright, we're finding some leftovers. We're already seeing the part of what appears to be the stem of a banana. See all the fibers in that visible as well. Ooh. Here's a piece of corn cob. Sometimes I'll break a corn cob open just because it seems like it's going to be like a little surprise to see what's inside. A couple worms hanging out. That'll also help it break down more quickly just by expanding its overall surface area by breaking it into multiple smaller pieces. Good bit of moisture, making it a wise thing, I believe, to till it up and bring the more damp stuff down low up top, let it air out a little bit. And on this one, I'm almost wondering if we'd be better off leaving even more of it exposed to the air. Oh, geez, I gotta be careful. I just flung a bunch of castings over onto the plastic, and with it, a couple of worms as well. Let's at least get the worms back. The castings don't matter so much, I think. But we don't want to strand a bunch of little wormies out in the dry. Not that we're going to be out here much longer. I mean, not that they would have had to have endured it out there for much longer. Because we're just going to make our way over to where the last feeding was, see how the leftovers are holding up. See how those leftovers of the socks are holding up. I don't think we're going to see any change in that material. That stuff has been unchanged for weeks and weeks. I believe that at some point, quite a while ago, all the cotton material in it was probably eaten up by the worms already. And the only stuff I believe we're seeing anymore is just the non-natural materials woven into the fabric, the stretchy, springy stuff. You could tell just from pulling on it, the way it springs back, that it is that sort of stuff. And it certainly has a thinner, almost like a see-through appearance to it, like a netting. So I believe it was probably combined with cotton, which the worms have done away with. And at some point I suppose we can remove it, but for now it probably doesn't matter. If the worms like hanging out on it, which it does appear that they do, we'll just let them have it and keep playing on it. So I think what we found so far are the two bottom pieces, the part that wraps around your foot, like the booty part of it on the bottom. And there was also the upper part. I cut each sock in half, and that upper part was really far gone. It was really just the upper cuff part of it, I believe, that remained, this piece here. So it does seem like the part in between was mostly cotton and mostly got eaten, leaving only the bottom booty part and the top cuff part, which I believe are not made entirely of cotton. But yeah, whatever. Let's let the worms have that back. Let them keep playing on it. Here's another stem of a banana. It does feel like it's a good thing to stir this stuff up because it is so damp down low. Another chunk of corn cob. Not quite as much corn cob in this one as we saw in the other one. Ooh. Another stem of a banana. Just interesting how the worms are all getting down in there. All right, I don't see many signs of the celery though. I wonder if that just means we've got a more heavily populated system in here, meaning more mouths to feed. Maybe just the fact that there seems to be more moisture in the system enables the worms to feed more rapidly and more thoroughly. Or maybe just a little combination of the both, I don't know. Okay, always fun to check systems like this that have lots and lots of worms in them. I suppose if I were to read off the information about how many worms we believe we launched this system off with in the beginning, it would probably be a far cry from what we're seeing here today. Because it does seem like the worms just get right down to increasing their numbers as soon as they occupy a new space. I don't know, this material somehow to me seems like it's just not getting broken down, so I'm excluding that as well. Alright, enough of this fun. Let's get these little wormies fed. Back to work, back up on the shelf to continue with their composting activities. And same as before, a napkin, a recycled coffee filter as surplus bedding too, and a napkin as well over here. And that'll become the foundation for the feeding. But before we drop in the foods, why don't we also lay down these test bedding objects and the leftover foods we encountered along the way, because it does seem like the worms enjoy that stuff. I just wonder if I should have done it in a reverse order, because now we're going to be dropping frozen junk right on top of a number of wormies that are right here on the line of fire. Well, whatever. Hopefully there's material enough that they can squirm down into if they don't like it. Let's just drop in what we've got here for them. Spread it out. I don't know. If this is a more heavily populated bin, which it very well might be, then that's probably a good thing that it looks like they might have received a little bit more food than the other bin did. But it could just be an optical illusion. It's a little bit tough to tell. So let's drop in the coffee, and then we've got ourselves a new feeding zone indicator for this one too, with its filter. Oh. Some grape stems too. I imagine those grape stems will probably take a little bit of time to break down, but all this other stuff I assume is going to go quite quickly. Is this more of that weird stuff that I excluded earlier? You know what this is? Jeez Louise. Little light goes on over my head once in a while when I'm reminded of what it is that I'm actually bumping into. These are tea bags. I had fed a whole bunch of tea bags to this system once upon a time, and every time we were encountering one of those, we would pull it out, and it's been so long since I remember bumping into one of those in recent times that I'd almost forgotten entirely about it. But I guess it took the second one to finally remind me of what that was, to get the little hamster in the wheel to start running again. Alright, well, that was a fun system to check in on. Both of these systems are really fun, whether we were doing ping pong feedings, or whether we were doing test beddings, or now that we're doing these wedge pattern or continuous flow pattern feedings. I don't know. It is kind of interesting when you've got sort of either a novelty bedding going on or a novelty feeding method or something of interest going on rather than just plain old boring vermicomposting. And having heavily populated systems also makes it a little bit entertaining too. Oh, looks like more of the stuff I flung all over the place is out here on the table. Let's see if I can get it all back into the system without making a huge mess. So, here too I'm going to be folding things back, but I don't know. Perhaps folding it back a little bit even further than the other one to give it exposure to even more air, to promote possibly even more drying of the material out here. And then maybe the actual weight of the two compared to one another will be a good way to judge if we're in sync with one another from a moisture perspective. Although it's quite obvious when you touch this stuff that it's a little bit damp. So let me just make sure I'm not taking any wormies to the sink with me when I go clean up. And I won't be taking you with me either, because that's boring. I'm not going to bother you with any of the cleaning up and putting away activities. But before I go, really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.